Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Schultz, and I was asked by Sarah Northup to make a recording of a meeting for parents that we held a week ago. This is now May the 11th of 2020. And some parents weren't able to be there, so I'm going to try to replicate that meeting by myself as a Zoomcast. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but certainly if you need my contact to ask me questions, you're welcome to do that later. This is, again, as I said, 2020 when I'm recording this, and I've asked Sarah to continue using this recording as she would like in future years. But to sort of give it a shelf life, I'd like to maybe make a new recording every several years. So I've asked her to only use it for up to 5 years, and as long as I'm working as the consultant doing the evaluations for the secondary program at Firm Foundations. So let's get started. I mostly spoke about a PowerPoint presentation that I had prepared to sort of like guide my thinking here. So I'm going to share that with you now. So some things I'm hoping to talk about in this meeting are how to choose a diploma program. I'm going to compare the Mason Dixon Homeschool Diploma with the PHAA Homeschool Diploma. These are two very popular programs in Lancaster County and across our state for homeschoolers to get credentials for their homeschooling program. You can also, in the state of Pennsylvania, issue a parent-issued diploma, but these are sort of the two directions that we're going to look at today. I'm going to talk about how to earn credits on your high school transcript, and you might be wondering, well, my child's only in 7th or 8th grade. Why am I thinking about high school transcripts now? And we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about what can be done to prepare for high school in 7th and 8th grade. And there are some things that can be accomplished even in middle school. Then we'll talk a little bit about whether this is possible for families to do, whether homeschooling is really possible through high school. And we'll talk about whether homeschoolers are considered legitimately schooled in our society today or not, just very briefly. So again, my name is Steve Schultz. I'm a chemistry teacher at Manheim Township High School. I've been there for 23 years. I also taught 5 years out of state before that, and I'm also certified to teach math. I taught math for several years as well. We homeschooled our 3 children from birth through high school graduation, and we graduated them with Mason Dixon homeschool diplomas ourselves after kind of looking into it when our kids were around 7th grade, actually. I've been doing evaluations for homeschoolers since 2002, so this would be my 19th year evaluating for students that are generally grades 6 through 12, but most of the students I've evaluated have been in high school. My wife Cindy is one of the math teachers at Firm Foundations. She also teaches at Pathways, another homeschool co-op, teaches algebra there. And she started that this year after our youngest graduated, and she was trying to figure out what she was going to do with this time and what she might enjoy doing. And so she's enjoyed being the math teacher, or one of the math teachers at Firm Foundations, as well as teaching other places. She's also the secretary at our church, Self-Direct Reformed Church, which is in the URCNA Federation, which is a NAPARC member, if you know what that means. And if you don't, it doesn't matter. And I'm an elder in that church. I wanted to talk first about a document that I wrote and gave to Sarah to release to parents back in February. So you might have seen this document already, and if you haven't, we certainly can get a copy of it for you. That's not a problem. Just contact Sarah or I if you have my contact, and I'd be glad to send you that document. But basically, it talks about what 7th and 8th grade families can do to prepare for their high school transcript. So there's basically 2 things that you can do in 7th and 8th grade. One thing that you can do is you can satisfy the 12 half-credit courses that are required for graduation in the state. And you see them listed on the screen here in front of you. So they can be accomplished anytime between 7th and 12th grade, and once they're done, they're done. So if you do it in 7th grade, you're finished in 7th grade, and you don't have to cover that course again. Now, of course, many of these courses you'll notice are high school level courses, and so you certainly can accomplish all of them in high school. There's no need to accomplish anything earlier, but most families find that they are accomplishing some of these things in 7th and 8th grade, and then that frees them up to have more time or to be able to have more freedom with their high school years. Either take more advanced classes or more elective classes or fewer classes even, to lighten that load during high school. All of those are viable alternatives. So you'll notice some of them are social studies type classes, some of them are math, but there's also safety education, including fire safety. If you didn't get the letter, please read that, because I do give you some ideas on how to handle that one. That's usually the stickiest one for people, how to actually get that half credit in safety is sort of a tricky thing sometimes, but I think it's actually pretty easily done. There's a health and physiology one, which you remember health class probably from when you were in high school too. There's a PE half credit requirement, one in music and one in art. So again, all you're doing is you're trying to make sure that sometime between 7th and 12th grade, your student studies a half credit worth of those subject areas. They can be parts of other classes, so geography does not have to be a separate class. General math, certainly most students are getting this done in middle school. Some students even algebra or perhaps even geometry is a middle school course for them. So these things can be accomplished earlier, or they can all happen once you're in high school as well. Another second option that can be accomplished in 7th and 8th grade is to document high school level work that's done prior to 9th grade. This is allowed by Mason Dixon only. PHAA will allow you to accomplish the 12 half credits before 9th grade, but PHAA does not allow for courses taken in 7th and 8th grade to appear on the high school transcript. So if you choose a Mason Dixon diploma, you can apply for this at the end of your 9th grade year. When you turn in your 9th grade work, you also turn in your work for 7th and 8th grade if you would like it to be on the high school transcript. Again, I go through this in the letter quite a bit, which courses are worth doing this for and which are not. Very briefly, if you are in the second year of a language, I don't know that that's necessary to document the first year of the language because that's already implied. But if you take geometry in 8th grade, you probably ought to put geometry on your high school transcript just so everyone knows that indeed your child is really accelerated in math if they're taking geometry in 8th grade, but you want it to appear on the high school transcript so nobody's wondering whether they ever took it if you start with Algebra 2 and don't have geometry in the transcript otherwise. So 2 courses are allowed to be added to the high school transcript. There's a small fee, there's an application. If the work is rigorous, if it's high school level and you document that, and it does require documentation in the application, this is something that all 3 of our kids actually did. So next week, a week from today, actually, the 18th of May, 2020, and some on the 19th, I'll be evaluating 7th and 8th graders at Firm Foundations. And the reason I asked to do this is so that I can look at these things before you get in 9th grade. And then when we do the 9th grade evaluation, we're just looking at the 9th grade courses, and this is already finished. So if you're hoping to do either of these 2 things that you see here on the screen, if you're hoping to earn those credits for graduation in 7th and 8th grade, I'd like you to have the documentation ready on the 18th and 19th so that we can check those boxes, have the paper signed, you'll get a copy, I'll get a copy, and then that is established and already sort of like in the books. You might have heard that the governor has waived the requirement for homeschoolers to have an evaluation. And that's great, but if you're in a diploma program, you still need to document every year's work. So that means you do still need to have an evaluation if you're in 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. If you're in 7th and 8th grade, it's going to be very good for you to do it so that you also, like I said, have those courses prepared for your 9th grade year. But you do not have to have a log of 180 days, which normally homeschoolers have to show that they schooled for 180 days. You don't have to have a portfolio of all of your coursework in 7th and 8th grade. All I'm going to really be looking for are those 12 half-credit courses that you'd like to count. Please keep in mind that these don't actually have to be courses. Let me back up a minute. They could be studies that you've done at home. If you've documented and logged 60 hours or 60 logged entries between July 1st to June 30th, those can count as your half credit course. So you'll remember there was one on US and PA history. And if you are studying that in 8th grade and you have that logged and you have the records of that for me next week, you'll be able to check that off. You might still study US history in high school. That's great. It's not a problem. You can certainly study it again, but you will have fulfilled that requirement, which just gives you more options later on. I probably would recommend putting US history on your high school transcript though. So if you were going to try to count that 8th grade history as your only US history, I would want to also apply for those prior credits and do that thing that Mason Dixon allows you to do. You can also use a third of a textbook. Most people don't do that, but it's legal. That's what the state allows. So that's what Mason Dixon allows too. Good. I think I just did some math there at the bottom of the slide to sort of work out how that might look. So if your child is taking an instrument and they have lessons for 30 minutes and they practice twice a week, in addition to that, that's 3 times a week. If you do it for the entire year, that reaches 78 hours of study. So you're way over the 60 hours required. So you can log those hours or entries and get music finished then. There's no reason you can't also continue, of course. If you play a sport for 2 hours once a week for 36 weeks, which is basically during the school year, you reach 72 hours. So you can see it's very very easily done. It's not really that hard to document. It's something that's pretty quick. You can also have geography 30 minutes a week for 36 weeks, gives you 18 hours. And of course, 18 is not 60. So you can then carry those hours from one year to the next in Mason Dixon. Mason Dixon allows that flexibility. So let's say you started, you wanted to start geography in 8th grade, but you wanted to finish it in 9th grade. You could take those hours from 8th grade, log them, document them, and count them as towards your high school hours and put them together from multiple courses. This is helpful for courses like geography because often it's embedded in a social studies class. And so you can just take little pieces of it and accumulate them over 2 years instead of having to do it all within 1 year. PHEA does not allow that flexibility. So you have to accomplish all of the 60 hours within that July 1st to June 30th of one single year. I made a little table here just to compare the 2 diploma programs that I wanted to talk to you about. So Mason-Dixon and PHAA are the 2 we're going to look at. PHAA well exceeds the minimum standards for the state of Pennsylvania for a student to graduate. They do that on purpose. It's deliberate. They have designed a rigorous program. It's particularly leaning towards the liberal arts. Mason-Dixon has a diploma that meets merely the minimum, pretty much the minimum state requirements. However, with a Mason-Dixon diploma, you can also get honors in academics, fine arts, leadership and service, or vocational. So that gives you some ways to have a little add-on to your diploma as a Mason-Dixon graduate. My kids had those add-ons. We did not just do the minimum to graduate, but there are students for whom accomplishing the minimum to graduate in the state of Pennsylvania is an amazing achievement. So there isn't any reason to feel that your if you do what your child is able to do, if you're accomplishing the best for your child, that is an accomplishment. And so Mason-Dixon allows that flexibility for that as well. Both of them have a speech requirement. PHAA simply requires one speech to be delivered per year per student. So your child would have to deliver a speech. I don't think there's really a length requirement to it, but nobody's wanting you to be ridiculous on that. It does have to be delivered in front of non-family members. So you can't just stand up in your living room and deliver it to your mom, dad, and 3 siblings or whatever, and the dog. That doesn't count. But if you're in firm foundations, you're going to be delivering speeches more than once a year. So all you have to do is make sure it's documented, it's done. It's really pretty easy to do. Just check off the box and you're good. The PHAA speech must be written by the student. You can't recite the Gettysburg Address and call that a speech in PHAA. You can do a recitation in Mason-Dixon. So while it looks at first glance that Mason-Dixon has a much higher requirement because they're saying you have 15 speeches instead of 1, note that first of all, as it says on the screen, those 15 speeches for Mason-Dixon are allowed to occur between grades 7 and 12, which gives you more time than just 4 years in PHAA. And also, more things count. So you can count the delivery of that speech, but you can also count preparing that speech, doing the research, doing the rough draft, delivering it in front of your family. So all of those things can count in Mason-Dixon. So I would say that's a easier standard to reach, given that there's more years to do it in. More things count than just the actual delivery of the speech. And you can actually do a recitation in Mason-Dixon as well. Both of them have a 10-page writing requirement, but you'll notice there's a pretty big difference here. PHAA requires a 10-page research paper each year, in addition to the other writing that's being done in courses. So that's a pretty steep requirement. Mason-Dixon requires 10 pages of writing total in those courses throughout the year. So if you're writing a couple 2-page papers, 1 or 2 in English, 1 or 2 in history, a lab report in science, you're getting to 10 pages much more easily than you are by doing all of that plus having a 10-page research paper. Now, unfortunately, with us doing the recording today, Sarah's not able to be here with this recording. If she had been, I'm going to tell you what she interjected at this point. She wanted you to know, as Firm Foundation's parents, that she is working to design the curriculum at Firm Foundations so that you're going to be somewhere between Mason-Dixon and PHAA's requirements. If you desire a PHAA diploma, you're going to have an opportunity to write a research paper. If you know you're heading towards a PHAA credential, then you're going to just need to make sure that yours is 10 pages long and that you accomplish a research paper that's going to meet PHAA's needs as well. Just briefly, for our family, for our 9th grade year, we used the health class as our way of writing a research paper. It's kind of cheating because it's not really developing a thesis and defending it. What we had them do was we had them study what it means to be healthy, and we had a secular textbook, and we had a book by, I think his name was Dr. Laramie. He was a doctor associated with Focus on the Family, and so he approached healthiness from a Christian perspective. So we talked about what it means to be healthy in body and mind and spirit and soul and other ways that we would recognize that may not show up in your high school textbook in a public school. And our kids then studied that and wrote their 10-page paper. So they had their 10-page paper accomplished, and we checked off the health box. I don't look at health as a course to be too worked up about. I mean, that's not like a major thing for us. We didn't have any pre-med students, so it met our goals, it met the state's needs, and we checked off 2 boxes. Okay, so if you are thinking about a PHAA diploma, then you're gonna have to remember to get the 10-page research paper done at all 4 years. Another criterion that you're going to have to pay attention to as a PHAA diploma candidate would be the books that you need to read. So they're actually more flexible in this than they were 15 years ago when I first looked at PHAA diplomas, or maybe it was longer ago than that, I don't remember. They allow several different ways to do this now. You can read 25 books, 3 of which are classics, 15 books, 1 of which is an anthology, or 15 books, and 10 of them could be books of the Bible. So they have several different ways to basically reach 15 books. That's what they're going for. Did I just say 15? I meant 25 books. That's what they're going for. So if you look over at Mason Dixon's side, then they're looking for reading in 3 genres, and that's it. So there's no number there. You're probably reading in your courses, many of them, and those genres include, prose and poetry, and fiction and nonfiction, and technical writing is in there too. So if you're reading a magazine that's related to a trade, that would count as well. So there's several different ways to go there too. I don't know anybody that's had trouble reaching that. I think Bible might be one of the genre too. So actually, no, I take that back. It's not, but if you're reading the Psalms, you're reading poetry, so that counts. If you're reading, history in the Bible, that would be nonfiction as well. So you can, reach those genres through Bible reading. There are some costs associated. You'll notice that the costs are a little higher for PHAA, but it's not outrageous, and I don't know that I would necessarily make the decision based strictly on cost unless that really is a deal breaker for you. But there are some other small fees that I haven't included here as well. Also, I should say there's a lot of similarities between the 2 programs that I haven't shown here. I'm really trying to help you decide. This slide is helping you decide which one you might go with, and it's not trying to say here's what the state law requires. There is other state requirements that I'll be drawing their attention to on a future slide, and I'll mention those when we get there as well. We already talked about that last one with flexibility, counting hours between years, and counting prior credits onto the high school transcript. I will say that PHAA has greater name recognition, especially early on when we were looking at this. I called 3 colleges and I asked their admissions departments, hey, do you know the difference between a PHAA and a Mason Dixon homeschool diploma? And they did. At least one of them did. So I thought, oh, so there's a thing there. But we felt that for our family, with the added credential of having that academic honors, as well as fine arts and music, that we were able to show that we were excelling, and our students were more than just minimally adequately prepared. This is an example transcript from a Mason Dixon student. So the plan is for me to prepare your transcripts for you in Firm Foundations. So I would be putting this together for you. It's kind of a lot, but probably the hardest part of it is calculating the GPA, which is a little tricky. But you can see here that their courses are listed by subject area, and this is what I was actually referring to earlier, that here are the state requirements at the top of each section of the transcript. Here are the credit requirements for each subject area. So in English, you need 4 credits of English. That means 4 years worth of English, 120 hours, or 120 logged entries, or 2/3 of a textbook. In order to earn a credit, you have to have 1 a year for 4 years. This student had 5. You'll notice that 2 of them here say LBC next to them. The student did dual enrollment at Lancaster Bible College. That was a really good deal for this student and many others. It only costs about $100. You pay like a fee, but you don't pay tuition. And but you're driving to the college probably, unless it's virtual. But a lot of students are driving, so you have to weigh that as well. There are different colleges that do it. You don't have to go to Lancaster Bible College, but the student took 2 college courses, and they each count as a full credit, even though they only are half a year. You'll see here that this course, World Literature, is designated OT, and if you read up here at the top, OT means outside class or tutored. So this student had a family friend teaching a class of other homeschoolers on world literature and world history. So you can take courses that are combined, that are taught as one course, and separate them into their subject areas. So for example, if you're using Veritas's Omnibus program, you can at least get 2 credits out of an Omnibus year because you're doing history and literature or language arts together. And so you can separate those out. You could even argue that there may be other course titles in there as well. We can talk about that when your students come for an evaluation, but really you want to not stretch your transcript really thin. You want to take courses that are robust and not just count to 120 hours. Stop the clock, write that down on the transcript, and then start the clock for the next course. That's not really good practice unless you have a reason to say, you know, these were actually 2 separate things, which sometimes they are. If you're doing a writing course and you're studying Shakespeare as more or less a separate course, the writing course might be a full credit on writing, and the Shakespeare class might be a half credit on Shakespeare. And there's nothing wrong with documenting those 2 kind of separate things as a credit and a half, provided you reach the requirements for both. But if you're taking a course as kind of a continuous whole and you're just trying to pick it apart so you can pad the transcript, I don't recommend that. But if you've done more work, hey, that can be reflected. So 3 credits in science are required. This student took CLEP tests. So you might be familiar with the AP exams, which happen actually right now in May. My public school students are taking their chemistry exam on Thursday. And CLEP is sort of similar, except it's not as rigorous as AP. It's not as widely used to award credits in colleges. So you have to kind of go to the college's website and look up, you know, what do they accept for AP credits? What do they accept for CLEP credits? Kind of know what you're getting into. We as homeschoolers, without using a co-op in most cases, we liked to give them a CLEP exam because it was something at the end of the year to say, hey, you know, how are you doing? How are you doing compared to other people? And sort of a means that way, but it's an option. It's just another thing on the table for you as well. Anyone can take it. You sign up, you sit down, and you take it. You take it whenever you want on your schedule. AP exams, you do not take it whenever you want. You take it when College Board tells you to. And you're in your desk with your pencil, and you have, you know, 3 hours, and you're done. So CLEP is a little different in that regard too. You can retake a CLEP exam. I think you have to wait a certain number of weeks. I can't remember what it is. But for AP, you have to wait an entire year because the course is only offered once a year if you want to retake it. So some of these courses are labeled honors. They were actually courses that ended with an AP exam. And you have to be careful putting AP on a transcript because that's a trademark. It belongs to College Board. So you have to be careful using their trademark. And my understanding for years has been that it is not appropriate to put AP on the transcript unless you are taking a certified AP course. In reading PHAA's manual again to prepare for this talk, I saw there that the PHAA is saying, well, you can if you take the exam. So maybe if once you pay your $100 for your exam, AP will let you put that on your transcript. Before I have a student who does that, I'll be making some calls to PHAA or Mason Dixon, whoever, and checking that just to be sure we're keeping everything above board. There are 3 credits required of math. You notice that there's an honors geometry noted here in 8th grade. This is a course that was prior credit that we had to apply for the student to count in high school. And the rest of these courses were taken during high school. Computer science is usually lumped in with math as well. Social studies, there are 3 credits required by the state. You'll notice that this student took a CLEP test for U.S. History 1 and U.S. History 2, rather than taking an AP exam. About 5 years ago, the AP, maybe 4 years ago, something like that, the AP program revised their history course, and they updated it to make it more progressive, more recognizing of more recent U.S. history, while de-emphasizing what many of us would think of as being traditional U.S. history, like, George Washington and Betsy Ross and Abraham Lincoln. So less of the colonial, pre-colonial, earlier U.S. history, and more of the civil rights and even later 20th century civil rights would be included in today's AP test. So we decided to go with CLEP instead of AP because we wanted to cater the curriculum to what we wanted to teach. So the curriculum that we were using fit the CLEP test better. So we did the CLEP test instead. The U.S. government and microeconomics you see here were AP level courses, and AP U.S. government counts as civics. So even though the course is entitled civics, this would allow a student to meet their civics requirement for graduation as well. You can see down here at the bottom that 2 credits in arts and humanities are required. This student has German 3 on their transcript, implying German 1 and 2 already happened. The student also took several musics. I also have had students earn credits in theology. Many homeschoolers are Christian, and they study the Bible and they study theology. If you are studying it and it's a course and it's curriculum and it's something you're learning, then that can also appear on your transcript. So if that's a distinctive of what you're doing at home and or in firm foundations or a co-op, it could be either or both, a mixture, you can document that and put that on a transcript. For my own offspring, we had them study catechisms. We studied the Heidelberg and the Westminster Catechism, and we did the Heidelberg over 2 years, the Westminster over 2 years. They did 30 hours each year. So in 9th and 10th grade, they studied the Heidelberg, I believe it was, for most of them. And those 30 hours each year then added up to 60 and counted as a half credit. We called Theology 1, Heidelberg, Confession, our catechism. And then in their junior and senior year, they did 30 hours each year in the Westminster, and that was Theology 2, Westminster Standards. So I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just saying that if that's something that's important to you, if that's integral to your homeschooling, if that's something that you value, if that's something that's important and you want it reflected on your transcript, if you're going to a Christian school and you think they might think that's cool, then I definitely would recommend you think about putting it on there. So all you need to do is log it and it's there. If you have a book that you're studying, we did, that's helpful, but it's not necessary. You just need to have something to show me in a portfolio to say we were studying. Maybe you wrote a paper. Maybe you made a field trip. All of those things can count. You just need to make sure you've shown that you've done this as well. So these things could happen in home and outside of what you're doing in firm foundations as well. And then there's additional courses. There's no credits required there, but health goes there, PE goes there. This student took a 8th grade course called Introduction to Engineering, which we also counted on the transcript. But what constitutes physical education? For us, I like to count, if they've raised their heart rate for 20 minutes, I counted that as a unit of gym. Um, usually there's some stretching on either side of that. You have to, warm up, cool down. So if their heart rate was elevated for 20 minutes, I counted it. If they were on a team sport, then that's really easy to do. But if you're not doing that, you can still do it if you're I list down here hiking, biking, skiing. Public schoolers don't get to count skiing as their gym class. Well, why shouldn't you? The only reason they don't is because it's inconvenient for them. And it's not inconvenient for you. So if you go skiing or you go kayaking or you go bowling, write it down. Just document that you've done it. You got your 60 hours, you have your half credit of physical education. You check off the checkbox that's necessary from 7th to 12th grade for graduation. And if it's in high school, we can put it on the transcript for you. Yeah, I think that might have been all I wanted to say there. At this point, I would like to ask you if you have questions, but like I said, please make sure you contact me if you have any. So a lot of times homeschoolers get nervous in high school because they're not sure they can do it. I like to look at it as, um, you've been homeschooling your children since before they were born. You taught them a lot before they were ever school age. All kinds of things. One of the hardest things I think to teach a child is potty training, and you did it. Good job. So we all homeschool our children in that sense. Absolutely every parent homeschools, and almost every parent also outsources some of their child's education. Almost all of us send our children to Sunday school or sit them in a pew and they listen to a sermon, or they go to scouts, or they take full classes, or they do a co-op program like you're doing at Firm Foundations. All of those things are ways of outsourcing and getting help. And there are lots of ways to do that in high school. You can take online courses, you can take dual enrollment courses that I talked about earlier. You can self-study AP classes, but you can also take them as sit-down classes and online classes. So there are lots of ways to get support and help as a homeschooled high school student. You don't have to feel like you have to be an expert in everything. If you're weak in math and you're not sure you can do algebra 2, then that's a place to find help. Find a co-op, find a dual enrollment class in a college, get help. If you're not sure you can teach writing, get help. But almost every family does this. If you're taking music lessons, you usually hire a tutor. If you're studying a language, a lot of times that involves hiring a tutor. Even some of my public school students are also getting tutors in certain subjects that they find especially difficult. So there's like this continuum of things I do myself and things that other people help me with. And there are some people who are really strictly on one end of that spectrum or the other, but the vast majority of us are somewhere in the middle, and that's okay. One of the great things that Firm Foundations offers is support for students who struggle with learning. And that's a really hard area to get support in outside of a public school. I've had friends with children with special needs have a hard time finding a private school that could take their child and help them with what they needed. Either it was too much for the private school to handle, or they just didn't have the personnel to do that. Well, Firm Foundations is dedicated to that as one of their emphases. So if you have a student who's struggling with learning, there's a great support there. In fact, I'll tell you, I'm really glad to be doing the evaluations for Firm Foundations, and I have no reluctance with doing evaluations for students with special needs, even though that's not my particular specialty, partly because Sarah's there, and Sarah is specialized in that, and so the two of us together make a really strong case for a student's competence. if someone were to challenge that, it's going to be a really hard thing to say that Sarah and I together, especially, as well as the teachers, and you as parents, are incompetent for teaching this child, no matter what their challenges might be. Um, yeah, we talked about dual enrollment. I talked about CLEP and AP. Dantes is another type of test that you can take. I have not had students take Dante's test, but I know people who do. And then, also other ways that we outsource help. So sometimes people are concerned about homeschooling because they're worried about whether it's accepted publicly and culturally. And of course, that's improved a lot over the years. There's a lot more acceptance of homeschooling than there was 20 years ago when we started, but certainly 40 years ago. It was even borderline illegal in many states, including Pennsylvania. This hadn't worked through the courts yet. The legislation hadn't been passed, but now homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. So why is there still occasional pushback? Well, some people still occasionally ask questions about whether homeschooling is valid. And I mention this just because it shows how rare it is. It just doesn't happen that much anymore. So it's almost like, the exception that proves the rule. So you might have heard, if you're listening to this recently, soon after I recorded, about 2 weeks ago, there was a Harvard professor who came out with an essay writing. There was, I believe, an interview about homeschooling parents and how they need to be tested and approved by the state, because who really knows whether these people are competent or not. And this actually is a pretty old argument for homeschooling, but that case was rebutted. If you saw the Harvard article, you might have also seen the article written by a Harvard graduate homeschooler who made the case for why homeschooling is exactly the kind of students that Harvard likes, and why homeschool students are well prepared for a Harvard education. For us in our family, I should also say the first bullet up there, the institutionalized discrimination is largely gone. What I mean by that is, it used to be that if you wanted to go into the military after being a homeschool graduate, there was a question: did you really graduate? So your parents gave you a piece of paper: did you really graduate? And so homeschoolers would try to go into the military, and they'd be told, you have to get a GED before we'll let you in. Those battles were being fought about 10 years ago when our kids were, in the thick of this. So, but I think those issues are all kind of resolved now. So really, colleges are not discriminating against homeschoolers generally. Military is not discriminating against homeschoolers. The diplomas are recognized, and there's a name for ourselves, and we've worked hard for it. Those who came before us have done well by us. There's a note down here in this third bullet. We, as a family, decided to join Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which is an organization dedicated to protect homeschooling from legal challenges. If you are concerned that that someone might challenge your homeschooling legally, Child Protective Services or truancy officers, or questions about whether your diploma is valid or not, Homeschool Legal Defense Association has been involved in those sorts of cases for decades. And we joined because we could afford the fee, and we felt that it was supporting homeschooling for ourselves and for other families as well. It's not a necessary thing, but if you have an exceptional child, if your child has learning disabilities or is extraordinarily gifted, those are the kind of kids that don't fit the average by definition. And when they aren't average, sometimes school districts will look at them and ask, are they receiving an appropriate education? Are they being challenged enough? Are they growing in their skills, their abilities, what they can do? And so sometimes it's helpful to have a protection, someone who's willing to go to bat for you. But like I said, firm foundations is a great benefit for those, especially um, who have students with learning disabilities. Great benefit there. I think that is the end of my presentation. It is. So I hope this has been helpful. It might be more helpful if you had a chance to ask me questions right now, but certainly feel free, like I said a couple times before, to check in with Sarah or ask me questions. I'd be glad to try to help you out. And I look forward to meeting you someday in an evaluation. And if you have questions about, what you should bring or what your portfolio might look like, or, what is a portfolio? Does that sound intimidating or scary? Feel free to ask those questions as well. But really you're just documenting the work that you've done. Here are the courses we've studied. Here's our log. Here's some samples of what we produced. So thanks again, and I look forward to meeting you soon.